Welcome to another special edition of the Marshall Pruett Podcast, presented by Cooper Tires. This time we're going back to 1978 with our dear friend Mario Andretti, the great Mario Andretti, to celebrate the 40th anniversary of his Formula One World Championship earned with the Lotus team using the pioneering Lotus 79 chassis, its ground effects, using the air to draw the car to the ground and create road holding like no other chassis at that time. Really and truly not only made great waves in Formula One, but has also stood the test of time. That Lotus 79 in its glorious black and gold JPS livery, one of the most beloved open-wheel cars in the past many decades. Looking back at this and knowing that Mario has spoken on the subject plenty of times before, many words have been written about this, instead of diving into the minutiae, we chose to go the route of speaking to those who maybe don't know everything about this, or might be somewhat new to this achievement. 40 years since he won that title. With that in mind, when we caught up earlier this year, realized there's only a few days left in this 40th celebration. When we spoke about this, had a great time going back to the true origins of the ground effects concept that he took part in and helped give some insights on before that really was developed. Also looking at the Lotus 79's predecessor, the Lotus 78, which fell short of expectations. Also some fun tales about developing the Lotus 79, telling us about some of its shortcomings, and then also its successor, the Lotus 80, which in theory, with a chassis that had just won the World Championship, so many wonderful ideas poured into it, one might expect the 80 to be something that was twice as good, or to have taken all the best parts and amplified them, allowing Mario to capture a second consecutive World Championship. Not the case, and also some fun and unique tales in there as well about what went wrong and some of the problems that they had with chassis rigidity. There's also a bit of sorrow in here, knowing that his F1 title came with the death of his teammate Ronnie Peterson in a very controversial crash at Monza. Additional dramas as well, with the start not being waved off properly. Gilles Villeneuve from Ferrari, Mario as well, being penalized post-race, being accused of jumping the start, altogether with the death of Ronnie Peterson and everything that just made Monza a very dark day, the day that Mario was crowned Formula One World Champion. It's a rather heavy event, even speaking about it 40 years later, so much respect to the great Mario Andretti for taking time to bring us inside of this world and to help us celebrate something that, as he mentions towards the end, he does not want to be someone that holds the distinction of the last American to win a Formula One title. So let's get going with our friend Mario as we ring in a new year and celebrate this beautiful 40th anniversary, the last time an American won a Grand Prix championship.
We know how revolutionary the car was, the Lotus 79. Where did you come into knowledge of it, what they were trying to develop? Peter Wright, all kinds of good folks, trying to build something really impressive that eventually got to that 1978 place.
Well, let's start it with the Lotus 78, and 77. Basically.
And that's always weird, the 78 and 77, the 79 and 78.
Yeah, exactly. So in 78, we're talking about Lotus 79. So Colin always tried to be a year ahead.
See,
he wanted to showcase that, we're
thinking
always forward. Yeah, we're working in the future. And but the thing is, to me, it was a process that took a while. The car, and like I said, a lot of people have an amnesia about this, quite honestly, but it didn't start out to be, even by Peter Wright or any of them, to start out as a ground effects car per se. It turned out to be that way because when we were discussing at the end of 1976, we were over in Hethel and talking about just kicking about, okay, what were your wishes, what's your wish list and so forth, and it comes to me and I said, well, my wish list is to have downforce with minimum drag penalty, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Okay, something. Okay, it's not reachable, but you know what I mean? You just throw that around. So, and the one thing that I had, that I knew, that I brought on the table was, I had an experience with a March car back in 72. And we were testing in South Africa with the car Granatelli owned, obviously, and he sponsored the team. And And South Africa, obviously, it's in altitude, so you got thin air. So normally aspirated engine, obviously struggling. So we figure, and the March had side pods. The shape of a wing, wing shape, and I figure, they're not doing anything. All they are a piece of body. So myself, I didn't, not knowing, not having experience in a wind tunnel or something, let's remove those. It's just another piece, that we probably don't need.
Sure.
So we removed those for testing, and all of a sudden the front end started flying. So, which means they were producing downforce. And so this is something that I said to Colin. I said, what if we put even the side pod, make them bigger, and then put a fence to it,
like you would on a regular,
like
on the
you would
end of a
have,
wing.
so to direct, and that's what they did. That's how the 78 was born, Lotus 78, and so. And we were, testing, and obviously the car was, we were getting some advantage out of downforce and so forth, but we didn't really know how much, because at that time even the wind tunnel, they didn't have a moving road, so the wind tunnel was still, so they were not getting any real figures, and the big, I think. What opened our eyes big time was we were testing in Hockenheim. And at the end of the two long straightaways, I think it was a Bosch curve, but I know there's a Bosch curve in Austria as well. It's a long right-hander and quite fast. And I know that through the Bosch curve, in the middle of the curve, I could find, additional downforce. So obviously with Colin, I come in, I said, looks like I'm closing the gap between the fence and the road because of the roll of the car, body roll. I was running a car fairly soft still. And so he said, right. So he sent Bob Dance to town to buy some strips of plastic to close the gap. So I'd go out. Oh, wow, all of a sudden, but then the plastic will wear off, then you're back to square one. So that's why if you look at the season in 1977, as the season was progressing, what we had like brushes. And then he had, one of the photographers was David Phillips. He hired him to go a different place, to photo, see which way the bristles are going, just to get an idea where the flow, and we were losing a lot of air, obviously, going on. So it says, so that's when the movable skirts were born. So as you can see, it was one process after another.
Evolution.
Now the next problem was the diffuser in the back. He never thought, Colin, about having a clean exit of the air, because that was important. Obviously, we were increasing the flow, which was creating the downforce. So the difference between the Lotus 78 and 79, it really cleaned up the back of Lotus 79, and he moved we had inboard brakes in the rear. Yep. So and this turned out to be a double-edged sword, by the way. What he did, he had Hewland cast half of the calipers into the gearbox, magnesium, so there would be as sucked in as possible, so it would have a nice flow to the back for the diffusers.
Sure.
And it did that, accomplished that. However, the gearbox runs pretty hot, and all of a sudden we were boiling the fluid. Yeah. And like even the first race that I won in Belgium, I mean, I had technically no brakes, because what it was, like a full load of fuel and everything else, you need a lot of brake. And I had every corner you had to keep pumping the brakes, and then after a while you really didn't even have any rear brakes, because it was the fluid was just boiling. And Ronnie and I just kept complaining to Colin all the time, and I guess he just did not believe that was an issue. But we won races, with no brakes, so the car was not, we didn't have that much of an advantage, if you will.
History has painted it as the perfect vehicle, but there were some limitations as well.
Talk to us, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just, so there were some shortcomings there, but the bottom line is, yes, the result of the development of the ground effect, all of a sudden, yes, the ground effect became something that became known and then to be exploited further. And the problem is, however, the more effect you have, the more downforce, the stronger the springs and everything you need to hold it up. So as we were gaining, like you get the following year, the Lotus 80 was a fabulous car for like 2 laps, and then all of a sudden you started, the getting flexing in the tub because we kept going stiffer and stiffer in the springs, and you kept popping rivets, and then so you fix the rivets, and then it popped something else. So the whole tub needed to be, redesigned and strengthened, and
keep finding the weak points.
There were so. That was the unfortunate thing to some degree, because it seemed like the Williams were the ones that in 1979 did the best job, their car, because they made everything a lot stiffer, and that's why the car really worked, vis-a-vis ours in the Lotus. But Colin was already thinking of something else. That was the guy was such a master, such a maverick in so many ways that he would get bored with the status quo, and then he was already thinking of his next design, and that one was about trying to put the downforce on the unsprung weight, and
it's a brilliant
concept. It was a brilliant concept, but it was not legal, and he thought he would get around it and so forth. But nevertheless, my benefit as a driver was to be with Colin when he really came up with the brilliant ideas, and took advantage of that. But I feel that I was part of that development, because I kind of, as testing the car, I understood the steps. I was one that was giving, the feedback on what was happening.
And what was it like, instead of being the what we so often see, the driver who receives the car, meaning, hey, look at what we made during the off season, please drive it and tell us how it is. What was it like being absolutely integral in helping to develop what became such an amazing car?
Well, I mean, let's face it, the success of any team is everybody working together, everybody contributing. It's not that, personally, I always was so interested in the dynamics of the car, because I felt that's a tool that I have to work with. And the more refined that tool, the easier my job is, and that I learned, right from the very beginning. And I always had my nose in there, because even, in Indy cars and so forth, especially with the rear engine cars, changing spring, I was changing my own springs, because, to understand exactly how the dynamics work, cross weight and all that. And I mean, Jim McGee will tell you that, but, so until we started, building jigs and all that, so to be able to repeat. But, and so with Colin, he knew that, I had a really good feel for things. And many times, some of the crazy things that I used to do on the car, he wouldn't even ask. He said, why are you doing it? I says, never mind, the story's too long, because I used to change, do some crazy things with the Ackerman, with the front, that they really did not understand. I used to change the Ackerman depending on how I wanted to feel, like shortening or lengthening the tie rods, still keeping the same straight toe out. Yeah. But when the wheels would turn, whichever way I wanted, to favor right hand or left hand turns, I wanted the right side to turn further. The inside.
Yeah.
And that's something that I work for me like peachy, and I put cars on pole just by doing that. In fact, when I put the car on pole in Monza with a Ferrari, they didn't understand that. That was the last change that I made to the car when I went out and finally put her on pole, just to get through the last most. So these are some of the things that, and I love, like I said, to understand that, because it's not a matter of just coming in and telling the engineer the car is doing this, that, or the other. It's also part of it is the suggestion as to what to do, knowing what you want. That's half of the battle, believe me.
When you're getting there when you're getting to the level of Ackerman changes, I mean, that's among the things you normally hear drivers ask for or call for, might even do physically. That's almost some outer space stuff. You don't hear about that often, so that's pretty amazing.
Well, I used to play with a lot of that stuff because I felt that the one way to get an advantage sometimes to your teammate and whatever is to have some of these things, at your disposal. And sometimes whether they even made a difference or not gives you confidence. You know what I mean? Okay, I have something that they don't have. That's all. It's all a game. In that sense, and and it's a selfish business. And nowadays everybody can see on a computer on a team, what the other guy's doing because it's all in black and white. But still, if drivers really are knowledgeable enough, to really understand the real dynamics, they can make small changes that you don't even have to write down.
That's brilliant.
What I mean. So that was my game anyway.
So with the Lotus 79, knowing that Colin was so apt to come up with ideas, but not necessarily just burrow in and stick on them, right? Looking for the next thing. Was he open, or how would he react when you're saying, hey, I love the idea of what you've done with the rear brakes, but as the guy who has to use them and my leg is getting worn out from pumping them, was he open to such things? Did he?
Well, not really. The one thing about, Colin, as I said, as brilliant as he was, he didn't want to hear a lot of things, a lot of suggestions to change on the car from the driver. He really did not, because he thought, okay, just worry about the driving, worry about the setup, let me worry about the technical side. And that's something that he would just blow his top, quite honestly. It was very difficult, to make the point there. But it is what it is. I mean, again, that was a brilliant approach to cleaning up the back end, since you had indoor brakes. But we paid a price, to some degree. And some races, I remember I was on pole at the Glen, and I mean, 3 laps, Carlos Reutemann with the Ferrari just could outbrake me by 20 yards. I mean, there was no chance, because, you can pump, but you can't. You know what I mean? There's no way you're going to outbrake somebody or, that's really got the brakes. And Ferraris always had good brakes, so, and that's what was killing me, So, and then we saw for some tracks more than others, but, again, there was an advantage, in the ground effects, but the car could have probably, mechanically could have probably been better.
So I've never had the impression that you were a man that received the word no, and just left it at that point. I mean, if Colin isn't being overly willing to take on some of your suggestions, does that lead to an enhanced relationship with Mr. Dance or some of the other mechanics saying, hey, I know Colin's saying don't do A, but why don't we do B?
Yeah, but this would have taken a very basic change, not just a tweak.
Sure.
It would have been a change that was would have been sort of a significant, I should say. So, the relationship I had with the mechanics, to me, was always, if there's anything, guys, that you feel that is a little bit stretched as far as the safety aspect, and just like when we started going to a lot more titanium, I refused to have a titanium brake pedal. I mean, and later on, the following year, that's what paralyzed Clay Regazzoni at Long Beach. So stuff like that, and mechanics would go along, with me, and I said, Bob Dance, I said, common sense goes a long way from getting mechanic. If you see something, I said, just tell me and I'll fight it, because, I like to live another day if possible, so, but that, again, things were working well. I mean, I think overall I couldn't have done any better than I did with Colin. Quite honestly, he gave me everything that I was hoping for, and but there's a story behind everything.
So you mentioned obviously the downforce figures coming up, stiffening of the car to create a more stable aero platform, makes more downforce. What were you finding in the Lotus 79 from your end? Were you having to spend more time doing weight training or other things to manhandle this car, or was it not that severe downforce-wise?
No, I mean, as far as physically, that was not an issue. I mean, obviously steering always got harder and everything, but you're young, and I was physically never, it was never any real extra burden. I think the thing got a little more daunting, later on, like in 1980, like in 1979 with the Lotus 80, which could have been a phenomenal car, but the problem is it had all the aerodynamics advancements, but it was like a lady with a beautiful dress but with cancer, because he had basically the same chassis underneath, the same tub, which was open on the side that didn't have a collar, and so
wasn't there.
we were testing, and I would jump the curb. I would have crossway for the next corner, and I was trying, to because then we had to go quite a bit stiffer on the springs, and again, as far as the physical effort, for the steering, you had to play with casters, a little more perhaps, but you could adjust with that. And believe me, downforce is so, a beautiful thing to have that you deal with anything just as long as you have it.
What do you recall, Mario, of development with the Lotus 79 once you started to get into the season? Because, if you look back at, finishing records and you look at how the season played out, obviously both yourself and Ronnie were fast everywhere, lots of wins, etc., etc., but curious how much of the car's basic attributes carried on through the year, and how many tweaks you guys had to make.
Well, not a lot, quite honestly. The car came out clean, and the biggest worry for me was reliability, engine reliability. And as much as Cosworth, were trying really hard, to always give us the best, most powerful, sometimes I paid a price for it, myself, because I was getting the best engines and stuff. And we had some failures there that obviously could have made the championship a lot clearer, But overall, as I say, the difference between Lotus 78 and Lotus 79, they really cleaned that car up nicely, it was just aesthetically, it was not just beautiful, it was functional. And that's the thing that really worked for us. I said the only issue that we had, as far as is this, still in my mind, is the brakes, rear brakes. And so, but other than that, as I say, we knew that we had a jam under us, and all we needed to do is finish the race.
So as you're looking back at 40 years ago with this wonderful world championship of yours, this car that your son Michael says is the most beautiful thing ever, and always will be, I guess, beauty aside, are there specific events during that 1978 year where you go, boy, that was so rewarding, or something that just stands out for you, individual events that you just cherish?
Yeah, I'll go to the Italian Grand Prix, where unfortunately the Ronnie Peterson, his accident, his death, obviously put a big shadow on everything. But on that race, I thought I drove one of the best races of my career, because when Jill took off, he was already almost in turn one by the time I reacted, but I didn't go with him, and I got penalized a minute as well.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I just kept going, and I pursued him. Here was the brakes, and I figured I got one shot at it, and it was like between Lesmos and Ascari chicane. And because I could get off the Lesmos probably a little bit better, but I had it, like I said, a one shot before. If I got by him before, he would nail me again in another braking, and that's when I got him the last lap, in Monza to win the race, and like I said, it was a good calculated thing, and nobody knew, but they had one shot about it. And then all of a sudden, I get classified sixth or something, because we got penalized a minute. And I would have fought for that one if it would have been for Ronnie's accident, but it took all the wind out of us. And because I think photo, any kind of videos or something would have shown that I didn't go. I think they penalized us because they penalized Ferrari, so they had to penalize somebody else as well, But to me, that was almost the highlight of that season for me.
Does the outcome of that race with Ronnie? I can't. In some regards, you think of those that we've lost, and maybe the pain subsides with time, but I don't know if the effects of that ever fully go away. Does the fact that you lost Ronnie, your beloved teammate as well, does that ever diminish as an injury, something that hurts that's associated from that era?
Well, again, you can't help it but bringing up a negative in the midst of an incredible positive.
Yeah.
It's always going to be there. It's always going to overshadow what could have been probably clearly for me the most satisfying day of my life, to win a world championship and to clinch it. But I could never really truly celebrate, and I never will, and poor guy, he certainly didn't want to take that away from me, I know, but it is what it is, and I'd like to think they probably would have felt the same way about me if it was reversed. So, it was a big, enormous jolt, that I said earlier. You never really totally recover from. You don't want to dwell on the negative,
sure.
But that's a reality that is very powerful. And and that's what we were handed us, and that's it. That's what we have to live with.
So looking back at this championship in this car, we see examples of the car in vintage racing. Duncan Dayton, for example, I don't think there's anything he loves more than climbing into his Lotus 79. Is it something that you have had a chance to drive years afterwards, or is it something that you are the type who enjoys being reunited with wonderful cars from your past?
Well, yeah, of course. If you had a nice girlfriend, when you were younger, you'd always love to revisit, and that's the same thing. Obviously, the opportunity that I had a couple of times, even with Duncan's car, which I know was superbly maintained and so forth, I really cherish that, the opportunities to do that. And again, but would I want to race it again? No, I don't think I needed that because, with vintage races, fabulous, but they have too many rules, and then we would break every one of them, so We don't want to do that. But nevertheless, I know that, just getting back in a car, just getting in the cockpit and everything brings everything back, and I would have wanted to just fit better, quite honestly, but I didn't have that luxury. But at the same time, I was it was just something that was very precious to have that opportunity again, to just get a feel that I remember quite well.
Wow. So we've had something interesting this year, 2018, with IndyCar, where they've changed philosophies on bodywork and downforce, taken some downforce away. We look back to the Lotus 79 as one that really sparked that high downforce revolution. I know that there are a lot of folks that hate downforce, think it's ruined racing. What are your thoughts on where this wonderful car stands, maybe as the inspiration that brought heavy downforce into the game, and maybe now seeing today what we have with IndyCar, there's a decision maybe we should pull back a little bit from that?
Well, the pulling back was already present in the 80s.
Yeah.
We had to do it because once engineers get in a hold of something that really works, they could have made the cars like it's a slot car. All you have to do is steer around and not even put any feel. So the daunting job was always for the technical group to try to put the car back into the driver's hands. And that's why, like even Formula One, they got rid of the tunnels, they went to flat bottoms. They still have tremendous downforce, but at the same time, they decreased the steepness of the diffusers and plane. And it's in a forever ending job, try to bring a balance back to let's make the driver, work a little bit harder and all that. And I think in IndyCar, they come to the point that with the cars, first of all, they look like a sports car with all the winglets and everything. That it was not really appearing like a single-seater open-wheel car anymore. And I think most of us were making suggestions that I think finally everybody started agreeing. We have to go back a little bit, and I think they, on top of everything, even the aesthetics, became to more of a pure race car.
Yep.
But at the same time, I think it's going to have value, in my opinion, as far as the races are concerned. I think you're going to see more movement, and overtaking, more action, rather than heavy procession. You cannot guarantee anything, but at least, a huge effort was done to try to achieve that. And quite honestly, the job is never done. You're going to have to keep searching. Nobody has a magic wand, believe me, no one in any of the disciplines of our sport. But, because, you put 10 drivers, owners together, and not everybody will agree with anything. So it's really difficult. But it's up to the sanctioning bodies and their technical group to sort of keep searching, keep tweaking. And kudos to Indianapolis, to IndyCar, the group for really embracing this. We got to do something, but the job is not done. You're just learning. They're going to learn from this season. As we go forward, okay, what can we probably do? A little bit of tweaking for next year or whatever. And there's plenty you can do because you can increase or decrease the amount of downforce from the surface wings.
Sure.
And they have options, obviously to do more underneath. So, again, it's a tough job. It's a tough job. Like I said, in Formula One, too, they increased the width of the tires, then they gave them more wing. I mean, talk to the driver sometimes. You talk to the world champion. Lewis Hamilton is open. He says, what? We can't follow the car in front. There's too much turbulence. The wings are too big. Okay, pay attention to what the drivers are doing, what the drivers are saying. So there's a tweak coming there too. I like the idea of the mechanical grip, factor,
Sure.
Because that you can. But when you're destroying the airflow and you cannot follow the car in front of you, you have no chance. With the mechanical, you do. With the aero, you don't. When you lose that much aero vis-a-vis the guy in front, there's nothing you can do. I don't care who you are.
So as we look back, Mario, to close out here on this, again, beautiful anniversary of your World Championship, how do you think it has stood up in terms of a point of American pride, knowing that, granted, I'm sure you would probably be happy to see other Americans succeeding and continuing the tradition that you forged with the championship. But what comes to mind, 40 years later, and even with that Lotus 79 as well? I'm guessing that stands the test of time too as one of the all-time greats.
Well, I'd love to see more Americans and be with a top team, to have a chance. We've had a period when we had several in Formula One, but it's I cannot even hardly believe that I had to be the last one to win a race in Formula One so far back, but it all comes to the individual. It's probably here in the States we have so much to offer a career of a racing driver that you can probably be a champion without even owning a passport. So that's the difference. And that's why you don't see so many of these young lads, the really talents that we know could be, because the champions here, the champions that are here can be champions there. Believe me. I don't care what anyone says. But if you're a champion here, like say, Joseph Newgarden, and you get an offer in Formula One, which offer are you going to take? I would only take one of the top three teams. Yeah. Why would you want to go to a team that has no chance of giving you results? Because all of a sudden they say, well, he's that level. You see what I mean? The only way to showcase in Formula One is very difficult because of the disparity of the teams. Unless you can go with one of the top three teams, if you're a champion capable, you're not going to give up what you can do here. So, and unfortunately, we're not rated, by some of the top team for some reason. Americans for some reason, they can drive. All of the things. I heard all of those. And that's what some of these, that's the problem I think that we're going to have. And you cannot tell me that a champion here in IndyCar doesn't have enough preparation, to be in Formula One, be effective. I mean, with all the abilities you have today to be in simulators and everything else, after a season, I guarantee you, you could really demonstrate your maximum and so on and so forth. So, but again, unfortunately, I don't know, we're just not considered to be at that level for some reason, and that's. But again, it's still. Will come down to the individual, one of our boys to say, I really want to be in Formula One, and really, you know what I mean? It's just, it's kind of another one of those things that it's difficult to really try to see the solution there. But I feel that Formula One has a very strong following here in the United States, and they would, Formula One would benefit greatly from a, competitive U.S. driver, especially now, we got Liberty Media owning and everything, a U.S. Company owning it and so forth. And but again, I don't know if that problem is going to be solved anytime soon.
Sounds like you weren't necessarily expecting to still be holding the last to win title 4 years later.
That's certainly not, one of the things that, I would feel, oh gosh, No, I mean, that's one that I would love to actually lose that, distinction, if you will. It doesn't make me any better, by saying I'm the only one for a while. It's just, I like to see, I love all of it. I love IndyCar, I love Formula One, and I love to see, however, the U.S. being more representative there, because there's a spectrum there that we are not at that level, and I don't like to hear that. And as you know, it's been already mentioned, and I jumped right in, but it is what it is.
Thanks again to Mario for sitting down and taking time to bring us back to 1978 to fill in some of the other fun on both sides of that championship. And also thanks to you, all the listeners who have made 2018 just an amazing year for my little podcast here. It continues to grow, and I'm so appreciative not only of your patronage of listening, but also supporting the sponsors who have come on board and helping me to spread the word that there is hopefully a fun and diverse little North American podcast that touches on open wheel, sports cars, does some other fun things too that you might enjoy. Truly, truly, from myself and my wife, thank you so much for helping to make 2018 just a glorious year for us with this podcast as it continues to take off. All right, I'm Marshall Pruett. This is a Marshall Pruett Podcast presented by Cooper Tires. Thank you for listening.